Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Lanice and I'm so happy to be sharing with you guys today. Today's a little something special. I'm going to be sharing with you how I went from an unbeliever to a believer in Jesus. I am super excited today. This is a story that's like super near and dear to my heart. Honestly, it's the story that completely transformed my life. It takes place in over about like a 6-month period. So many little details, so many layers to it all. But honestly, it literally transformed my entire life. So I wanted to share that with you guys today. So let's jump right into it. So I was raised most of my entire life not believing in God. I wouldn't say I was an atheist because I wasn't like aware that I was not believing in God, but it just wasn't anything that was like really taught or prayer life. It was just I guess like we would do a prayer once a year on Thanksgiving, and some part of us would feel like super like nervous or like awkward, so me and my siblings would literally giggle the entire time because it was a once a year type of thing. And that being said, I was raised in the most loving home and had the most incredible childhood. Me and my brother and sister, we have had like an incredibly blessed life. Our parents, oh my gosh, they're amazing. And but just the only thing is we weren't raised with either religion or relationship with God. So fast forward to when in 2015 I had recently just like moved in with my boyfriend. I had graduated from nursing school. I had my nursing license. I worked as an LPN. We got our first apartment together. I had a car. So basically like I had all the things. I had a career, I had a car, I had a boyfriend, I was living with him. So I basically, as a young 22, 23-year-old, I had basically everything the world would say that you would need to feel successful, right? But somehow something deep inside of me never felt fulfilled, and it started to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And I kind of like slipped into like a mini depression where I just was feeling so unhappy. I started calling out of work a lot, and it just came to a point that I went to actually go see my doctor, and they gave me a 5-day home to be at home, a paper to be at home, a 5-day excused absence to be home and have like basically like a mental break. And in those 5 days, I just felt like things were actually getting worse and worse and worse. I would be driving and I remember everything just looked kind of like dark. I felt like I was wearing sunglasses even when I wasn't. And so in that time frame, I had been like searching for everything. I started seeing a therapist. I was doing yoga. I was believing in the universe. I was collecting like stones for healing and all of that stuff. And just nothing was working. And towards the end of, and that had been like a few months process, and towards the end of the 5 days that the doctors gave me to be home, I just started like reevaluating. And one day when my boyfriend was leaving, he was going to work, and he was just like, you need to go outside, you need to do something, and you need to get rid of those stones because they're not working. Like this is not going to bring you joy, but you need to get up and get out of the house. And so when he left, I really evaluated everything, and I was like, you know what, none of this is actually working. And I'm like, what do I need? And I swear to you, I heard, you need God. And I was like, I need God. I don't even believe in God, you know? So I was, at that point, I just like searched. I was like, good churches in New Bedford, where I live. And the list of churches came up, and one of them, I liked their website. It was Christian Fellowship Center in New Bedford. And I just decided that I was gonna take a plunge and go that Sunday. That Sunday comes, and I asked him to come with me. He didn't want to, so I went by myself. When I got there was just something about the atmosphere, and they did an altar call, and they said, if anybody needs prayer, just come on up. And I don't know what made me, I mean, now I do, but at that moment it just didn't make sense. But I just walked right up to the altar and I kneeled, and I was just like super nervous waiting there, and somebody came and prayed over me. And the things they said honestly shook me to my core. They started declaring things, speaking of very personal things that I was struggling with, down to the detail of like that journal on your bedside table. You need to get it and write in it and start in the Book of Proverbs, just like all in details. And I was just like, how do you know I have a journal on my bedside table? Because I had just recently bought the journal. So I was like super freaked out to the point that I like didn't even open my eyes. Still to this day, I have no idea who prayed for me. And I just started to dig. I did exactly what she said. So I started to read the Bible in the Book of Proverbs, and I was intrigued. I started going to church out of curiosity, not because I actually believed. I was just like, if there's a coincidence here, let's call it that. But like, I was just like intrigued. So I continued going. And then the pastor challenged us to listen to nothing but Christian music for 30 days. And I started doing just that. And slowly but surely, I felt the depression like break off of me. And I was like just feeling like a new person. And I was so intrigued and so excited to get to know God. And the first Sunday of the new year, I remember this preaching like it was nothing. Pastor Ken, he is amazing, love him. But he was just like, you need to choose. And this was a message, but I felt it was a directly towards me. He's like, you need to choose. You can't be a person that tries to sit on 2 chairs at once. You need to choose. Which chair are you going to sit in? Are you going to be of the world or be of Christ? And in that moment, I just knew, I'm like, being in the world, that wasn't working for me. So let me try being of Christ. So at that moment, I made the decision that I was going to start living for Christ. And that was the first step. Little did I know God was going to come in and wreck my life. Like, come and flip every single table and leave nothing unturned, leave no corner unseen. God came in, and when I say he moved, y'all, he moved. That is just the beginning of my story. So for the next few months, I started just being consistent in going to church, and things just started to change like within me. And I remember being with my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, he looked at me and he was like, I was getting ready to go to church one day, and he was staying home, and he looked at me and he's like, you're not going to turn into one of those girls that just listen to nothing but Christian music, wear skirts, and don't have sex, right? And I was like, hell no. Literally still remember to this day. And I know the Lord was just like looking at me, shaking his head. And guess what? I turned into exactly just that. I mean, like almost just that. So Christian music just became like my outlet. Just hearing those lyrics just like speaking life over me, and that be like constantly in my head, it just became such a source of encouragement for me. And going to church, I found community. I just the messages, it was like every Sunday the Lord was speaking to me. And then my boyfriend started coming with me, so there was like a big transformation there, right? And in that time frame, life was just going really, really good. So we started to go to church together, and then we started to pray together, and things shifted there for us. I used to think that like sex was the most intimate way you can connect with a person, but let me tell you, try praying with somebody. Nothing feels more awkward and more like raw and revealing than praying with somebody. So we would go to bed every night and just like take turns praying. Like one night was his turn, one night would be my turn. And in all reality, it's like praying and then turn around right around and sinning, right? So, but I really believe that God started using that, us both being in prayer, us both seeking him, to start maneuvering that transformation. So after a while, I just started feeling really convicted of how I was living. And what I mean by that is, like, I started feeling like guilty, like something was telling me, like, inside of me, like, you're not living right. And so I went to him and I told him, I was like, listen, this is about to sound crazy, I know, but I feel like we're not living right. And I feel like we're not supposed to be having sex. No one ever told me that. I never read it in the Bible, but at this point, but I really felt like unsettled, like I wasn't living right. But I also didn't want to make him seem like I'm just trying to force you to marry me. So I was like, you know what, like, we don't have to like move out, but how about if we just like stop having sex, you know, let's just try it out and see how that works. And he was like, Lance, that really doesn't even make any sense, because like we're still gonna be sleeping in the same bed and living together. He's like, if we're gonna do that, we might as well not live together. And at this point I was like, nah, I'm not ready to go back home to my parents' house and all this stuff, like, because I wasn't like, I couldn't really like feel it, like, you know. So anyways, we agreed to try it out, and at this point we lasted like 2 weeks, and then we failed. Like, we ended up having sex, and the guilt that came up on me, I legit couldn't even like open my Bible. And mind you, this is nothing that anybody has ever said to me, but it was just this feeling within me that I knew, like, yo, I felt like I just did something like so wrong. I feel like I can't even look for, like, oh my God, like, just don't look at me. And so I stopped reading my Bible, and I stopped seeking him. I don't even think I went to church that weekend, just because I just didn't feel right. So we had a weekend trip planned to Texas, and so we went out to Texas and we had an amazing time. And then we went to this event, and the event had a church, an optional church service to go to, and so we went. Let me tell you, when I tell you that I was shooketh to the core, girl. So we're in this event in Texas, mind you. I haven't gone to church, I haven't been reading my Bible, and I'm in Texas with a whole random pastor speaking. And the guy, he was speaking about something so totally different, and then he was like, you know what, so I met this young man, and he had given his life to Christ, and then he started feeling like he was living wrong. And you know what he did? He was living with his girlfriend and having sex and doing all the things, but then he started feeling like he was living wrong. So you know what he did? And some lady in the back was like, married her. And he's like, no, he did the hard thing. He moved out. And I was sitting there like, the Lord was speaking right to me. And at that moment, I just started bawling. I'm like bawling my ass off, because I just knew, and I just felt like I tried to run away from God the whole entire time, not reading the word, not going to church, and just thinking like I'm just hiding my face from him. And he met me right where I was at in Texas, a whole different state, a whole different church, a whole different like event, and just met me right there and gave me a message so clear. So God will meet you where you're at. Anyways, so at that moment, I just knew like I cannot go on doing the same things. So then my boyfriend was like, why don't we just get married? And I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? So we had a trip planned for September. This was July. We had a trip planned for September, and we're like, why don't we just like get married in September, and then we'll use that as our honeymoon. So we had this whole extravagant plan. I was like, well, we can't live together in the time being, so I'm just gonna move in with my friend Harmony at the time, until I can tell my parents. And I was trying to, like, I needed that space in between, because I'm like, yo, they're gonna think I am crazy. Like, I go from living with my boyfriend to nah, because like I'm just not gonna have sex because I'm living for God. And I was like, I think I'm crazy. I was already getting like the weird vibes from my family from like just being in church and being super excited about Jesus. So putting this on the top would just be like cherry on top of she's lost it. So I move in with my friend, and literally we came home on Sunday. On Monday, a whole lot of truth came out about our past, our relationship. He was just super honest with me after like kind of like the truth came out through somebody else, and then he just went in and told me like every single detail of things I had never known before. And honestly, like I've never been so heartbroken in my life, because it just felt like my whole entire life was a lie. I felt super betrayed. I felt super hurt, and I just felt like my world was ripped from under me. I just felt like it had just all been a lie. I literally was not aware of any of these things, and then I am told all of this. It was just like everything had been a lie. And at that point, I remember I just like got in my car and I drove, and I looked at a pole, and I literally for a second thought of just like ramming. I don't know why, like it just felt that devastating to me. And you might not understand that severity if you're like just like, girl, a guy broke your heart, but there's like so many layers to it to make me like get to that point. Anyway, so I was just crying and crying, and I just called my friend, and I was just like sobbing to her on the phone. And the next thing I look up, Harmony, she's just like amazing, and I look up and I see her standing there literally in her pajama shorts, barefoot. She literally just like got in her car and booked it and met me. So Harmony was such a big piece of my journey with Christ. Honestly, I had never at this point had a friend like her before, and she genuinely she taught me what it was to love Jesus. And I honestly I don't even have the words right now to express like how grateful I am for her. So one of the main takeaways about like talking about her and our friendship is, if you can find somebody, even if it's one, but if you can find a tribe of people who just love Jesus, women who love Jesus, to be able to pour into you and just really just walk with you in this, man, like the value in that is so important. My journey would have not been the same without her. So Harmony, if you're watching this, I absolutely love you, and I'm super grateful for you. So if you can find a tribe, find one person. Don't do this life alone. So yeah, when Harmony picked me up, we went back to her house, and I was just sobbing. Honestly, I was crying so much, and it sounded like it was like this deep wounded, like when I replay the sound in my mind, it sounded like a hurt animal. Like that's all I could really describe it as. And I was just so pained. And so Harmony was just like, you know what, let's just pray, Lenise. And she prayed over me, and she's like, just ask God for a word. And I literally, in that moment, I was just like, you know, and I opened up the Bible, I asked God for a word, and he gave me one. And I was reading, and I was just so overcome. So he gave me Isaiah 52. I'm gonna share it with you guys, and this is from the Amplified version. So what I was taught is that like you just put your name into the Bible, like speak that scripture over your life, and it's like as if God is speaking right to you, whether it's an Old Testament, New Testament, just put your name right in it. So I'm just gonna read it to you that way. Awake, awake, put on your strength, O Lenise. Put on your beautiful garment, for henceforth there shall no more come to you the uncircumcised and the unclean. Shake yourself from the dust. Arise, sit. O Lenise, loose yourself from the bonds of your neck. O captive daughter of Zion. For thus says the Lord, you were sold for nothing, and you shall be redeemed without money. For thus says the Lord God, my people went down at first into Egypt to sojourn there, and they oppressed them for nothing. Now I delivered you both from Egypt and Assyria. What then can prevent me from delivering you from Babylon? Then it goes down to verse 6. Therefore, my people shall know what my name is and what it means. Therefore, they shall know in the day that I am he who speaks. Behold, I am. 9. Break forth joyously, singing together, you waste places of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Lanise. 10. The Lord has made bare his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, revealing himself as the one by whose direction the redemption of Israel from captivity is accomplished, or whose direction and redemption of Lanise from captivity is accomplished. Then it goes on to 11. Depart, depart, get out from there. Touch no unclean thing. Go out into the midst. Clean yourselves and be clean, you who bear the vessels of the Lord, for you will not go out with haste, nor will you go out in flight, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. Behold, my servant shall deal wisely and shall prosper. I read that, and I don't know if it spoke to you guys the way that it spoke to me that day, but I read that and I was just like, all of a sudden this like rush of peace came over me in the midst of all the chaos, all the hurt. This rush of peace came over me, and I just knew at that moment, he's got me. And it was, I needed to understand the importance of this, right? So I had been in a relationship since I was 13 years old. I made a lot of really dumb decisions. I had a lot of like bondage that came with that relationship. I found my value in that relationship. I found my worth in that relationship. I was just known as his girlfriend for the, like, my identity was in my relationship. And then even when I moved forward and had a relationship with God 6 months prior, started my relationship with God, I always held him, my boyfriend, at this pedestal, right? So I know the reason why everything happened the way that it did is God allowed me to feel that shake, to feel that hurt, to feel that like my world was being ripped up from under me, was because I had him on a pedestal. I had my boyfriend on a pedestal. And so God just wanted his rightful place. He wanted to sit at the throne of my heart. So although I did believe in God at this point, it was just like I still held my boyfriend higher than him. So the reason why this all happened was to like knock him down and just put God at the throne of my heart. And honestly, when he said, I will go before you and I will be your rear guard. I will, you were once sold for nothing. This time you will be redeemed. Those words stood out to me so much as like, wow, he's got me. I don't need my boyfriend. For the first time in my life, since I was 13 years old, and this was like, I was 23. So 10 years of this back and forth with this relationship, this unhealthy relationship. And I, for 10 years, felt like I needed him, right? This was the first time I had felt like I don't need him. I don't. And this like wave of joy came up on me, and I was just like, I looked up and I smiled at Harmony, and I was just like smiling. I was like, my tears had stopped, and I was just full of joy, and I was like, I'm good. And she was like, are you? And I'm like, I am so good. And I know she probably thought I lost it at that moment, but it was such I think it was like the most real encounter with God that I had up until that point. And I just knew that I knew God had me. I didn't need my boyfriend. And so from that moment on, that moment in Harmony's bedroom that night, July 12th, is when I really gave my heart to Jesus. I had given, like I was saying I was living for God, but I hadn't given my heart, my whole heart to Jesus up until that moment. And when I tell you that things, I thought that was shaking up. The things that came after, girl, it's a whole nother video. It's a whole few videos and there's just testimony after testimony after testimony. The Lord spoke to me so much after that. I got baptized. He spoke to me about just departing. And when he said depart, it was like I had been thinking about leaving my relationship, but I didn't really want to let go of it. But God spoke to me, so depart, girl, depart. And that's what I did. We broke up, and I was just so steadfast on God and his word and his plan for my life, and I just took full speed running ahead. I was just like, that's it, this is it, Jesus is for me, and that's it. And I ended up taking like a month trip to Cape Verde and just dealt with a whole lot of like, me and God just had some real personal time together in that time. Then God spoke to me about who my husband was. God spoke to me about a trip that I was supposed to take, a 6-month trip. He was just like in every single detail of my life after that. And I just was like, I was full in. I jumped in 2 feet after that day, and life was never the same. So I just tell you this story just to encourage you. If you've been sitting on the fence, whether you should dive in 2 feet or not, girl, let me just tell you, there is no other better decision that I have made thus far. Whether it was marrying my husband, having my children, nothing compares to me living and fully surrendering my life to Jesus. Like, he just came in and just mended all the pieces that I didn't even know were broken, right? When I said I felt like my world was falling apart and like ripped out, it was actually falling into place. God had to like dismantle some things so then he can reshape them and reform them exactly where they needed to be in order for me to function with him and live out this beautiful, blessed life. If I wouldn't have this life I do now if I didn't fully surrender to Jesus. So yeah, there's so much more that I want to share with you guys, but that was it. That is how I went from not believing in God to being curious about God and to jumping in full feet. The Lord speaks to you. He will confirm things to you over and over again. It's all in his word. And gosh, he's waiting for you. He's so waiting for you. He's like a gentleman though, right? So like, he'll knock at the door, but he won't come in until you answer. So if Jesus is knocking at the door of your heart, girl, I promise you there won't be anything better. So that is it, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it encourages you. If you have any questions, I know I kind of give you like the Cliff Notes summary of it all. I feel like I sit here and talk about all the details, all the layers for hours and hours. But no one wants to watch that. Hours and hours. So if you have any questions, just leave in a comment or DM me. You can find me at Lenice.Fuentes on Instagram. And yeah, I would love to connect with you, and I would love to hear your story. I'll share more about how God told me who my husband was, our journey in celibacy and courting. I will share more about how God spoke to me about traveling for 6 months, and all the things in between. So I hope that this video bless you guys, and I will see you in my next video.